Hi friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany. In today's video, I'm going to be judging 3 books by their first chapters and then making a decision which one of them piques my interest the most, and that one I will continue on with and review in this video. I did not come up with this idea. Daniel Green did this recently, and I thought it was a really cool way to highlight a variety of books and discuss their writing and their first chapters. So I've picked 3 books from my TBR this month that we're going to try this out with. So I'll be reading the first chapter and giving commentary on it, and then I'll decide which of them I most want to continue with right away and finish it and give you my review. Here are the 3 books we're going to be trying out. First, we have The Wings Upon Her Back by Samantha Mills. This is coming out at the end of April and it sounds really interesting. It's a debut sci-fantasy novel that is supposed to be a complex, action-packed exploration of the costs of zealous faith, brutal war, and unquestioning obedience. Coming out in May, we have The Quince Project by Jessica Parra. This is a YA contemporary take on The Wedding Planner that sounds like a lot of fun. And then finally, I'm going to be trying out It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Dass. This is a supernatural thriller with horror elements that is drawing on Caribbean mythology with magic and murder. Sounds like fun. Those are the 3 books for this video. Let's read the first chapter and see how it goes. I will start with The Wings Upon Her Back. Hopefully these chapters aren't too long. In the beginning, there was a city of stone and sod, a people of humble means, a home in a valley of no consequence. And then the gods came. Saint Lemaine, A History, Volume 1. I do love books that do this, especially if they're fantasy, or they have a little excerpt from what's supposed to be an in-world piece of literature or history. I think that's fun and it adds to the world building, so I'm a fan of that. There is a word for these. I can't think of what they're called. If it comes to, I'll let you know. On the night that winged Zemeli fell from grace, a cold wind was blowing from the east. She would remember that wind later, the wind of her last flight, and in her memory, she would ascribe an extra chill to the air, animalistic and biting. Okay, so Winged Zemeli, I'm assuming that winged is a title, it's capitalized. This is haunting, but vague. I don't really have a sense of what the story is at this point. At the time, it was a downslope breeze like any other, and she didn't spare it another thought. Zemeli was flying back to Redesda? Zemeli was flying back to Redesda. I think it's Redesda. After a month patrolling the eastern border. Her back was hot, aching beneath the press and pull of her mechanical wings. Her thoughts were occupied by a long catalog of physical complaints. Knees, bad. Hips, very bad. She was too tired to thank the wind. Okay, so we have mechanical wings, which explains the cover a little bit. Is this gonna be steampunk vibes? As opening paragraphs, I don't know that these are really gripping me in the way that I want opening paragraphs to. They're fine, but I'm not immediately hooked. I'm guessing maybe she's some kind of a soldier since she was patrolling the eastern border. I don't know, I want more information. Ahead, faint glimmers of light peeked through the midnight cloud cover. She saw orange, red, gold, flame colors without the fire. No other city in the world could boast that sight. No other city was blessed the way that Redesda was blessed. Those fireless flames were portals, gateways to another realm, and on the other side of their strange and slippery light there were 5 gods, fast asleep. Interesting. So we've got portals to another realm, gods sleeping on the other side, and it says no other city in the world could boast them, so there's something unusual about this city that has these portals to this other realm? Okay, I'm getting more intrigued. Zemeli loved the 5th of their number, the Mecha god, patron of the city's warriors and keeper of the law. In order to serve her god and keep her city safe, Zemeli had to leave both behind and spend long shifts in the mountains, flying the border till her wings were practically hot enough to melt the implants in her back. She was tired of it. She was tired. Okay, so one of the gods is a mecha god, which I guess ties into her mechanical wings. I will say this makes it sound pretty miserable to have these implants in your back if they heat up like that. Like, wouldn't that cause problems? I have questions about how this works. If she has a human body, I don't know. I have questions about whether this would actually work. Maybe it's too much detail to suspend disbelief. I kind of feel like that's a hard line to walk of if you want to have somebody with mechanical wings, do you just not give any detail? Is that better than giving too much detail? I don't know. It looks like I'm right. She must be some kind of a warrior. She keeps her city safe by flying the mountain border. I just have a lot of questions. Is she the only one doing this? Are there other people also patrolling the border? I have questions. It was in this state that Zemolai arrived, exhausted and smelling of hot metal, at Tower Kemiana? You know, sometimes I feel like fantasy names are unnecessarily difficult to pronounce. Kemiana? I think that's what it is. Or Kemiana? Kemiana? Unclear. So she arrives, exhausted and smelling of hot metal, at Tower Kemiana, the heart of the warrior sect. 25 stories of brick, wood, and metal, reaching all the way up to the Mecha God's portal, a marvel within a city of marvels. How is that a marvel, though? How is a 25-story building of brick, wood, and metal a marvel if they have enough technology to make mechanical wings? I don't know. I have questions. Zemolai checked in at the 23rd floor watch balcony, as expected. She had an argument there, less expected. And then she stormed down to the workers' quarters on level 3, where she launched a surprise inspection. The substance of her argument did not really matter. It mattered a great deal, in parentheses. The inspection was simply overdue, and somebody had to do it. It did not have to be her. She was looking for a fight. It was there that she ruined her life. Okay. I feel like this is supposed to be more intriguing than it actually feels. I just have more... I have more questions about how this is all coming together. Let's keep going. The workers' quarters were empty when Zemolai arrived. 5 rows of cots and trunks stretched across the room. I will say it sounds like she must be pretty high up among the warriors if she's doing an inspection. I feel like we're getting information that's not actually the information I want. The workers' quarters were empty when Zemolai arrived. 5 rows of cots and trunks stretched across the room, every sheet tucked and every handle latched. The ceiling thrummed with distant music, a party 2 floors up. It was St. Orlesky's festival day. The trainees would be raising toasts to his name all night, taking advantage of the extra day off. The absurdity of the situation hit her all at once. Half of the district was celebrating, but here she was, sweaty and aching and in dire need of sleep. And instead of celebrating or sleeping, she'd let her temper drive her to this lonely bunk room, picking through strangers' things. And such things, repeatedly patched clothing, books, both religious and recreational in nature, bags of sweets. Well done, Zemolai. This was definitely worth your time. She was about to leave when she found an idol. It was wrapped in a shirt, an attempt at concealment likely made in haste when the bells rang for an unscheduled kitchen shift. She dug deeper and discovered a false panel at the bottom of the trunk, something that should have been found earlier if anyone took the job seriously. Zemolai sighed and pressed a call button over the cot. A harried voice came through, made tinny by the speaker. "Kitchens?" She glanced at the nameplate on the trunk. "I need Shay Savro at his bunk." "On his way." Okay, kind of interesting. I guess there are forbidden idols. I'm just unclear on why this is where the book is starting. Maybe it will make more sense the further we go. It feels like a weird place to start the story. We don't really know anything about this character. We're slowly learning a little bit about this world, but I don't feel like this is something that is making me emotionally connected to the character or making me really care about what's happening in the world. I'm a little curious. I know that apparently what she's doing now is going to somehow ruin her life. It's fine. The person in the kitchen says, "On his way." Had there been a note of hesitation there, or was that a trick of the static? It didn't matter. In a minute or 3, the worker would arrive and fall on his belly and deny everything and kick a terrible fuss on his way out the door. But for the minute or 3 until that happened, Zemolai held the idol. It was a beautiful thing, finely wrought of copper and lovingly maintained, molded in the shape of a sleeping figure with its arms crossed over its chest. There was a hint of a face, soft hollows where eyes might be, and the barest lump of a nose, and feet tapering down to a single point like a writing utensil. The scholar god. Ooh, which they're supposed to be serving the mecha god, so maybe that's a big no-no of like you shouldn't have idols of other gods. I'm guessing that's the deal. The door slid open, quiet as a sigh, and Che Savro entered the room. He was an older man, a tired man, his skin faintly blue from decades of cheap enhancements. He didn't protest when he walked in, though he surely knew why he'd been summoned. He only sank to his knees in front of Zemmelai and waited, letting slip a single soft please under his breath, like he didn't even notice it escape, a prayer not meant for her ears. And Zemmelai hesitated. Who is Zemmelai? What is her role? I feel like there are critical pieces of information that are missing, even though we're getting a lot of information. It's hard to know. I mean, she must be higher up, but I don't know. It's an opening thing, but I have questions. It is a little weird to me that one of the warriors is older. You would expect that they would be younger people. That seems typical, so I feel like that's maybe a little bit unusual that one of the warriors in these shared barracks wouldn't be young. I have questions about that. We are told his skin is faintly blue from decades of cheap enhancements, so there must be some kind of sci-fi version of, I don't know, cosmetics and plastic surgery. Why it turns your skin blue, I don't know. Okay. She wasn't uncertain about procedure. The law was perfectly clear. And she didn't pity the man kneeling at her feet. She was accustomed to being implored. But there was a quiet dignity to his resignation, a bone-deep weariness that she felt more and more each day, and she found herself wavering for the first time in a very long time. "How long have you worked in the kitchens?" she asked. His voice was gravelly and low. 15 years. Okay, I mean, I guess that makes sense. If he's not really a soldier, he just works in the kitchens. So I guess that kind of explains it. And how many years have you pretended to serve the worker god? 20. That's interesting. So even though he's working in the warrior area, he's supposed to serve the worker god? So is it like you're only, like you pick your career based on the god you worship or something? Huh. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that. She appreciated that he didn't lie. There were no time-consuming protests about his true allegiances. His loyalty, some error in her inspection. "Please, winged Zemmelai, there has been some mistake. This isn't even my bed." Zemmelai turned the idol in her hands, running her fingers over the silky smooth impressions where other fingers had repeatedly done the same. The law was clear. No private worship. No falsified allegiance. Che Savro was an undocumented disciple of the scholar sect. Unacceptable. Those few scholars who remained were isolated in their tower, tending their archives and writing down history. It was the safest place for them. It was safest for everyone else. Che Savro had disguised himself as a worker to access the Mecha god's own temple, the very heart of Administration Tower Kamiana. It was devious, abominable. But she was thinking of that argument again, the one that had led her here, the one that didn't matter. This is piquing my interest a little bit more because we're getting information about how we have a really high control government that's also involved in religion. So no private worship. So he maybe was a spy of the scholars. And of course, the scholars are isolated. There aren't many of them. And it does make sense because I think on the back it talks about it being a fascist state, and the control of knowledge is a big part of that. So interesting. I'm more intrigued by this part. Zemmelai didn't know how many people she had detained over the years, and she didn't care to add it up. Her memory was a blur of rainbow-tinted hair, cheap mechanical limbs, enhanced eyes flashing with anger and grief and defiance, roughened voices asking what, asking how, asking why. She only knew that she was tired and she was angry, and she hadn't seen the scholar god in a very long time. "Get rid of it," Zemmelai said roughly, and she thrust the idol into his hands. Che Savro gaped at her. He glanced at the far door, no doubt looking for the warrior trainees who would drag him away to his conviction. Che Savro had worked in this tower far too long to believe the Mecha God's judgment ever fell in favor of the accused. The hall is going to empty soon, Zemmelai said. I won't tell you twice. Interesting, so she's letting him go? What is she angry about, and why? It's okay. I feel like we need more information, but okay. He lurched to his feet, the idol clutched to his chest. Zemmelai watched him go, and her stomach lurched. She told herself it was her liquid dinner to blame. Painkillers washed down with a mug of nerve-deadening sludge. The dose grew larger every year, and she was beginning to suspect her guts would give out before her implants did. She felt giddy. She felt sick. For one fleeting moment, she felt more than a machine, more than the mechanical wings on her back, but also far less. Wings meant nothing if they were not in service to the Mecha God. A hairline crack ran through Zemmelai's devotion, had perhaps been there for decades. She'd expected to break years ago. She'd expected to die, screaming in battle, or berserk in a cage, a fate taken out of her hands, a violent mercy. She hadn't expected the end to come like this, quietly, gently, without fanfare. One small hesitation had opened a window of fresh air in a place that had not breathed clean in ages. Zemmelai was waking up, but she didn't know it yet. Is it a little extreme to let somebody go as your first sort of step towards not doing what you're supposed to be doing? Maybe. Zemmelai took an interior elevator to the 15th floor, too weary to exit the tower again and fly up to her balcony. An opportunity missed. Her room was sparse and dusty. A bed, a writing desk, a trunk of belongings. It was little different than the workers' quarters, except that it was private and lockable, and there were wing hooks mounted on the wall opposite the bed. She backed up to the wall and hit the disengaged lock on her spine. Threaded cylinders spun counterclockwise in her ports, whirring louder than she liked. They needed oiling, and then the hooks abruptly took the weight off her back. Zemmelai groaned with relief and stepped out from beneath her wings. Cool air flowed over the open ends of her ports, making her flinch. The thick grooved cylinders were anchored deep into a layer of callus on her back, their mechanical nerve endings wired directly to her spine. She felt exposed, raw. She wanted nothing more than to collapse in bed and forget this entire day, this entire year. Huh. That's kind of cool. That's interesting that the wings disconnect from ports and come off. I guess it makes sense. That would be more useful. But how do they, like, if they're metal, how do they work? I wonder, I have questions about the functionality of the wings. But cool. Kind of cool. A month she'd been on patrol this time. A month. A month of 3-day shifts, scouring the horizon by light of day, withstanding the chill winds at night, alighting only briefly to relieve herself and fill the bandoliers of food and water crisscrossing her chest, and then a night's rest on a rocky outpost while a traveler took her spot, before another 3 days in the air. Zemmelai was fucking exhausted, but her wings were filthy, and that couldn't stand. She stretched them open. These days, the smithies were beating out metals in all the colors of the sky, but Zemmelai had never desired anything more than the gleaming copper. Old-fashioned, maybe, but the sight still brought a faint smile to her face. That seems untenable. Maybe they're not actually human, because who can do that for 3 days straight? I don't know. It sounds excessive. Like, are there not enough other people to also do what she's doing? Please, whispered the memory of Che Savro, and Zemmelai's smile vanished. What she'd done tonight was foolish. She'd been angry. She didn't want to think about it, because she didn't want to think about it. I don't really like the parentheses asides. I think it's a stylistic choice, but I find it really distracting, and I don't like having it in the parentheses. I feel like there could be a better way to do this. Zemmelai clamped down hard on her thoughts. In that direction lay panic, because in that direction lay Mecha Vodaya. Vodaya, the leader of their sect, and by extension the city-state of Redejda, was a permanent fixture in Zemmelai's thoughts, warning her away from sedition, demanding more, demanding better. Vodaya was not the Mecha God, but she may as well have been. Zemmelai focused on wiping down hundreds of individual feathers. They were thin and flexible and expertly wired to a hollow frame, not actual copper, but a more conductive compound developed by the Creator God's finest engineers. Zemmelai didn't pray anymore, but in this way she showed her devotion. She bottled up her worries, her fears, her anger and despair, and she spent that energy on every joint, every wire, every gear. She buffed out scratches and smoothed out dents. She lost herself in the work. A body was a machine, and a machine was an extension of the body. The mecha god crafted them, and in return, they crafted themselves. Zemmelai had not come so far by thinking past that. But as her usual cocktail of stabilizers and stimulants leached from her system, doubt took their place. The sour feeling in her stomach intensified, and her body grew numb. She finished at last and crawled into bed without bothering to wash. A familiar weight held her flat, her ports bare to the cool sheets, and she braced herself against the crush of oncoming sleep. She wanted it, desperately, but she also dreaded it, because in a blink the night would end, and she would wake, and she would begin this routine all over again. Eventually, she slept. The stuff with the wings is interesting. It's definitely giving steampunk vibes, which is cool. So far, I'm moderately interested. It's one of those ones where I'd want to keep reading and see where things go, but I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. Let's finish chapter 1. We're almost done. They came for her in the dark, hours before morning, and it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. 2 pairs of hands, winged Chava and winged Tescadoi. I'm struggling with these names, y'all. They kind of are giving me Russian vibes or Eastern European vibes. That's what they sound like, but I am struggling with this. Okay. Hauling her up like she was a trainee late to breakfast. She swayed in their grip, still drowning in fatigue, but she had the presence of mind to ask, "For how long?" Winged Chava glowered, "Till Mekhavadayev returns." They stepped onto the balcony. Zemmelai looked down at the city, spread out like a ring of dollhouses below. Her heart sank. It had taken her 26 years to move up 15 floors. How far would this error knock her back? The winged gathered themselves to launch, hands clamped tight around Zemmelai's arms, an awkward means of transporting a prisoner, meant to embarrass her. But then her thoughts cleared, and she nearly laughed. That's all this was meant to be, an embarrassment, a reprimand. Che Savro had been caught, and he'd given up her name in self-defense. She only needed to explain herself to clear all of this up. They never made the jump. An explosion rocked the tower, shocking and loud. Wood cracked, glass shattered, a fireball blossomed up from one of the granaries, tickling their feet with heat and their nostrils with burning grasses. Burning grasses or burning gases? Maybe it's supposed to be gases? Okay. And winged Chava shoved Zemmelai to the deck, screaming at her to stay still, and winged Tescadoi launched into flight, his radio in one hand, his bolt gun in the other, and a dozen more winged leapt from their balconies, the chaos below matched by the chaos above. And Zemmelai was in far worse trouble than she'd thought. Okay. Interesting. Interesting end to chapter 1. I'm like moderately intrigued. I'm interested enough that I would keep reading more chapters and see where it goes. Let's move on and read chapter 1 of the Quince Project. It's like, I hope I didn't pick ones with super long chapters. Ooh, this is a longer chapter. We'll see how this goes. Okay. If the devil's in the details, then El Diablo loved to cha-cha on Spanish accent marks. A dash over the A in tonight's side dish, for example, and party guests would get a baked dad instead of a baked potato to accompany their filet mignon. I checked the menu card one more time. All clear. A quick scan down the rest of tonight's other courses. Thankfully, none of those spellings needed acute accents, diareses, or the dreaded tilde. Nothing spelled disaster more than a missing squiggly mustache mark over the N in años. Having watched Poe's birthday banner drop, only for it to wish my sister happy 15 buttholes instead of happy 15 years, I spoke from experience. Okay. I mean, like, this is a really entertaining opening, and I do know that this is about a girl who is a party planner, so the fact that she's checking a menu card for, obviously for a quinceañera, because that's what she plans, to make sure that the Spanish words are spelled correctly with the right, dashes and tildes and stuff. This is funny. It's humorous, so so far I'm pulled in. I lowered the perfectly spelled menu onto the middle of the gold-rimmed plate with shaky fingers. Flashbacks of that night knocked against my chest, but the memories of the months leading up to it walloped hardest, threatening to bust my heart open like a piñata. I shook my head and pulled my planner from my bag, thumbed through the pages filled with Student Body Association calendar events until I hit the Angie Montes B-Day Party Final Checklist tab. Going down the rest of the list, I surveyed the ballroom. Head table set to perfection? Check. White roses and pink hydrangeas brimming from the center of the other tables? Check. I think this is a really great opening. So we know that the main character is Latine. We're talking with Spanish. We know that she's doing party planning, but then also we know that there's something that she's grieving or something difficult that happened in her recent past that she's avoiding thinking about. So I feel like this is a really solid setup to the main character, and it also gives us the tone of what the book is probably going to be. I'm guessing this is all on page 1, which is humor with a little bit of serious undercurrents. That's the vibe I'm getting, and based on the description of the book, that should be what it is. So I think that's a really strong opening page. As our school's SBA event planning chair, I'd gone down similar lists countless times. Every check mark of the pencil usually steadied my pulse. No such luck tonight. Probably because this wasn't a Mateo Beach High winter formal, prom, or fundraiser, but my first solo-ish attempt at party planning. As if starting a side hustle wasn't stressful enough, of course the first party out the gates had to be a quince. Sure, this fiesta celebrated the rite of passage for the birthday girl, but it could be one for me too. Because if tonight went off without a hitch, I could keep checking off boxes for both my short and long-term goals this summer, starting with Angie recommending my services to our classmates, and ending with the party planning experience I needed to apply to Mandy Whitmore and Associates' Fairy Godmother internship. Okay. So we know she's a high school student. She's trying to get party planning experience to be able to apply to an internship. This is great. I feel like this is really effectively introducing us to the main character, what her goals are and interests, and kind of what the book's going to be about. My question reading this is the Fairy Godmother internship. It makes me think, is there magic in this book, or is it just kind of playing with words? We need to read more to find out. Let's see. I shut the planner and hugged it close, whispering Mandy's mission statement. With the wave of a magic stylus, plus a few hands-on tricks of the trade, my team of fairy godmothers, apprentices, and I will make your event storybook stunning. Okay, so it's a gimmick, but I think that's cute. Closing my eyes, I recited the last sentence. Happily ever afters are our business. Like a spell working its magic, pieces of my HEA painted themselves behind my eyelids. A calendar stuffed with tons of picture-perfect parties, acceptance into a great college with a stellar hospitality management major and PR minor, preferably one with a kick-ass volleyball team so Poe could also go there. Before I slotted in my wishes for Dad, Juno's voice shattered my Torres family vision board. We're good to go, Cass! So we were not sure who Poe is. I glanced across the gilded room to Juno, my AP chemistry lab partner moonlighting as the DJ. I flicked the gold-ringed eraser end of my pencil at them, and just like that, the first step to my family's HEA had liftoff. Now, the rest of the party needed to unfold perfectly for it to keep soaring. I tucked the pencil behind my ear, pressed the side of the ancient walkie-talkie, relics from Poe and my Pokemon catching days. Even with the bumblebee yellow plastic, it looked super professional, so long as I kept the side with the Pikachu speakers down. It's almost time to open the floodgates, Callie. Are the assets in position? A burst of crackles, then a drum roll emitted from the speaker, probably her tapping her nails against the walkie-talkie. At SBA meetings, she had always thrummed them against her binder before delivering bad news. Sorry, Cass. Tweedledee and Tweedledum have gone AWOL. Again. Every chance they got, Ishan and Sarah sneaked off for an impromptu makeout session. I should have forced them to share their location when I had the chance. I'll track them down, I grumbled. What about Angie? Is she finally ready? About that. My knuckles clenched the planner's edges. What now? She has locked herself in the bridal suite and won't let me in. Ugh, fine. I'll handle it. I always did. I'm going to open the doors. Can you come back here and let me know if anything else happens? Roger. Over and out. I gave Juno the signal. A second later, an instrumental version of My Heart Will Go On filled the ballroom. I opened the set of double doors, smiling at the flurry of guests blurring past. This is so fun. I know it said that it was a version of the wedding planner, but this is definitely giving me wedding planner vibes, but YA. If you've seen it, it's a great film, but you definitely have her in the opening scene of planning a wedding. She's really great at all the details, and there's a bride who is freaking out and she has to go in and comfort her, and I feel like that's what we're getting getting with the birthday girl in this. It's fun. It's really cute, I think, especially if you've seen the original. Stepping into the hotel's lobby, I broke into a sprint. No signs of the 2 Quince court members gone missing. No skinny dipping in the pool out back either. Right when my fingers curled around Pikachu's tail, the talk button, ready to order Callie to come help with the manhunt, there, through the hotel's tall arches that led to its beautiful Spanish courtyard, they stood. Their necks defied geometric principles, even the AP ones I'd learned last year. Blame it on the chismosa part of me, definitely not on the never-been-kissed part. I stepped closer for a better look. With all that teeth gnashing, how were their Invisaligns staying in place? As over-the-top as this PDA was, though, I couldn't deny this spot did scream perfect background for making out. Burgundy roses rustled in the warm breeze, an eager moon shone silver from a darkening sky, bathing these lovebirds in extra shimmery light. They weren't even the couple of the night, and although I'd witnessed more of these stolen moments than I could count, both in person and in the rom-coms Mom used to watch to perfect her English, a bunch of butterflies fluttered through me. I threw back my shoulders, flinging off the romantic in me, and stepped into the courtyard. Hey, you two! I'm really enjoying this. I feel like the writing is light and fun and entertaining. It's totally giving me rom-com vibes. She's never been kissed, so probably there's going to be a romance coming in here somewhere. I'm really enjoying this. It's fun. The couple broke apart. Moonbeams caught on Sarah's plastic aligners. The moonlight didn't similarly bounce off Ishan's, not with all of Sarah's lipstick smudged over them. We were just, they mumbled at the same time. I put up a hand. Ishan, fix your tie and wipe your Invisalign. And Sarah, I reached under my blazer into my utility bag, pulled out my hand, and flung a tube of lipstick every dama in the court was wearing tonight. Catch. Captain of the softball team, she caught Mac's ballet slipper in a manicured hand like a pro. Now hurry, I said. The procession starts in 10. One problem down, one more to go. My body vibrated with a purpose, with a plan. There was nothing I loved more than a plan. Why does this make me think that all of her plans are gonna go awry because she is such a planner? I think this is great. Like, I'm so entertained and very excited to keep reading. I sprinted forward, scrunching smoothing serum on the split ends of some fellow classmates, pointing tipsy tios the right way. I narrowly avoided crashing into Angie's abuelita. Sorry, Senora Montez. I'm gonna say this. I feel like I'm gonna say this wrong. Huachale, niña. I feel like I might have said that first word wrong. I know a little Spanish, but not enough. Excuse my pronunciation. She squinted at me before gesturing to the floor. No, her gold-spiked kitten heels, way more dangerous than embroidered cloth and rubber-soled chanclas worn by less bougie grandmothers. By the look on her face, she'd have zero qualms about using them on my behind if I didn't watch where I was going. Why hasn't my granddaughter come down yet? Okay, she'd also use the sandals on me if Angie missed the grand entrance. Do you even know where she is? Of course I do. Only because Callie told me a second ago. There's nothing to worry about, I promise. My loud gulp made her eyebrows draw tighter. Please, make your way to the ballroom and enjoy the hors d'oeuvres. Angie will be down any second. I broke into a run before she could say anything else. Too bad I couldn't outpace Angie's cousin Fernando. Cass, wait! But if time waited for no one, neither would I. No matter how cute Fur was, or how many times he'd asked me to be his date for a cousin's wedding, always a planner, never a +1. Not to mention, I'd never been on a date since, well, ever. Okay, so clearly she's a little uptight and detailed, but also good at what she does, and needs a little bit of romance in her life, and I feel like the world is going to upend her plans. And I find that kind of a story pretty delightful. This is fun. But it definitely feels very YA. I feel like this is an appropriate teen version of what it's doing, which is great. I ran through one of the restaurant's kitchens, losing him in a maze of chefs, hissing grills, and boiling pots. By the time I reached the bridal suite, my thighs burned. I leaned against the door and tried to turn the knob. It refused to budge. I knocked. No answer. Great. Angie had gone full-on Quince-zilla. Okay, I see what you did there. It's a little on the nose with the wedding planner stuff, but I think still really fun. Open the door! It's me, Kaz. Still nothing. I pressed my ear to the door. No TV or music from the other side. Just the click, click, click of stilettos pacing across marble floors. Angie, if you don't open this door right now, since we were both too old to believe in El Cucuy, I reached for the other monster Latines feared until they died. I'll go get your abuelita! A huge gasp from the other side of the door. But hey, desperate times called for desperate measures. The door creaked open. Angie grabbed my pink blouse and dragged me in. Careful, Ange, this is my lucky shirt. She locked the door behind us. Sorry, if I tore anything, I'll buy you a new one. I brushed my hands down my blouse. Every pearl button had stayed put. No tears in the pink silk. The shirt I planned to wear to Mandy's fairy godmother internship interview one day was still intact. I blew out a huge sigh of relief. It's fine. I'm glad one of us is. The top of her bronzed and contoured chest rose and fell. The Swarovski crystals beating her bodice sprayed tiny rainbows on the walls. Why are you freaking out now, Angie? You've worked your butt off learning all the routines. Contrary to stereotype, not all Latinas had rhythm. In exchange for Spanish tutoring, Marcus Bennett, our school's captain of the dance team, agreed to choreograph the dances. Except, to get them down, Angie had put in the 10,000 hours herself. You could do the father-daughter dance, the group waltz, and the El Baile de Sorpresa blindfolded. I wish I was blindfolded. And mess up your makeup? Okay. I feel like I just don't have a lot of commentary. I'm just really enjoying reading this. It's so entertaining and dramatic, and I feel like we're getting, the glitzy dress that you would wear for a quince. It's just it's a lot of fun. It's great. She jabbed me in the shoulder. I'm serious, Cass. I know we practiced everything for weeks now. She didn't have to finish telling me. I'd spent the last month of the spring semester and the first week of summer vacation prepping this party. Except we didn't practice. Angie dropped her chin to the neckline of her gown. How it's going to feel having everyone staring at me. I swallowed a chuckle. Most prom queens and homecoming kings couldn't wait for the one night that guaranteed all eyes on them. How did you handle it for your quince? Was it as big as this? Well, My voice broke off, then vanished. Let me guess. It was an outdoor venue, wasn't it? A lump lodged itself in my throat. Over a year ago, my 15th birthday's venue had been outdoors, all right. I knew it! She stomped her foot. Careful with that! I crouched to the floor, checking the heel. Your mom's going to kill me if another pair of Louboutins gets ruined on my watch. Even worse, one more complaint from Mommy Dearest and she'd probably badmouth me to all her friends. I didn't even want to entertain how the bad reviews could impact the side hustle, or, by extension, the internship. My shoulders tensed before relaxing. Thankfully, the heel's intact. So clearly we have a fairly wealthy family, which makes sense if they're spending all this money on event planning for the quince, but fancy shoes getting worn. And I'm also getting the feeling that her quince did not go as planned, or maybe it didn't happen. We know, again, from the first page that there's something that she's not thinking about, something hard that happened in her life, and I feel like maybe it's tied into her 15th birthday, and we now know that she's 16 since it was a year ago. Which I've got to say, that's a nice way to weave in the age of your character without it being super obvious. Angie stuck her tongue out at me. Real adult behavior from someone who's about to become a woman. The moment I said it, the walkie-talkie crackled from my back pocket. Either an electric volt from Pikachu or an incoming message from Callie. Both probably warnings that Mommy Dearest, or gasp, Abuelita, stormed this way. I rose up and spun Angie around toward the mirror, pinned up a tendril that had already come loose. Showtime, I said, dragging her by the elbow, except she dug in her heels. A daytime quince was my first choice, outdoors like yours. Her voice got soft and far away. But Abuelita didn't want me to get even darker. I bit my lips, protested silently by letting another ringlet stay outside the perfectly sculpted bun. And what about the flowers? Angie asked, probably to keep stalling. Which kinds did you have? All types. Technically not a lie, but that damn lump kept swelling. Probably in every arrangement imaginable. Yup. Also true, only they'd been placed on the ground, not across the middles of exquisitely decorated tables. Okay, so I know from the back that I think her mom had passed away and she's grieving that. So it sounds like her mom's funeral was on her 15th birthday, which that's horrible. I mean, it's already so difficult losing a parent and then on top of it being on your 15th birthday like that. Whew, that would be rough. A wistful sigh escaped her lips, as if she were watching a memory reel inside my head. Before she realized the true story, I bent down again, rearranged gigantic swaths of pink tulle swallowing the lower half of her body. Marble floors? Uh-huh. More like blocks of marble atop perfectly cut grass, engraved with names, dashes between dates, adjectives, and so many nouns. I rolled some of the fabric between my fingers. Swore beloved wife and mother skimmed my skin. My eyes went misty. As if it couldn't get any worse, I stood up, only to discover her peepers followed suit before turning red. Kill me now! I reached under my blazer for my utility bag, dug into the top pocket where I kept the travel-sized bottle of Visine and silk candy. Angie, we need to move. Out of this room, before her mom and Granny tore down the doors, before more memories rushed in uninvited. Oh, Cass, I'm scared! It's scary. I stared at myself in the mirror when I said it. Grief apparently took cues from vampires, because that mom-shaped hole in the middle of my chest cast no reflection. I've got to say, so far, I really like her as a character. Even though she's dealing with all this stuff internally, she's very no-nonsense externally. I think she's going to be an interesting character to follow for this sort of a story. I flicked my gaze back up to Angie. Look up. I squeezed a drop into each eye. Beads of water clung to her faux lashes. The glint matched the gleam coming off the diamonds looping around her neck. I'm not going to lie. There are going to be hundreds of eyes on you, 128 to be exact. If you can, try to focus on just one pair of them. I pictured Mom's eyes, so dark, yet filled with so much fire, like stars burning over an endless desert, like candlelight beaming under a rolling blackout. Their brightness started to dim 2 years ago, fading slowly until no light remained. It's gonna be like, I feel like it's gonna be sad dealing with like maybe Mom having illness and dying, so slowly fading, we're getting that information, and yet she's staying on top of it, trying to get this girl ready to go out to the party. I squirted my own eyes with sprays of Visine, especially when you're giving the thank you speech. Angie shrieked, exactly like I knew she would. Calmete, I have one right here. Speech writing wasn't my forte. Still, I couldn't pass up a chance to write this one, not when it felt like fanfic of what I wish I would have told Mom at my quince, if I'd had one. I pulled the speech from my pocket. She plucked it from my fingers. False lashes fluttered as she scanned each line. Thank you for coming and helping me celebrate my 15th birthday. Tonight, Poppy put a new pair of heels on me. I'm sure my little brother tried his hardest to hide my last doll. Pause for laughter, I said, drawing the pencil from the back of my ear. While it had a long way to go before becoming like Mandy's magic stylus, I flicked it at Angie anyway, motioning for her to continue. Aw. That's like, it's cute and sad at the same time that she wrote a speech for her of what she would have said. She gave a small nod. After finding it, I'll pass it down to my little sister. These rituals will mark my transition from girl to woman. Even without these traditions, I'd still be standing here in all of my womanhood, because one person has taught me how. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Mama, your light illuminates everything it touches. I mouthed the rest of the speech with her. Every word made my eyes burn. Each one also packed that massive hole in my chest, made the constant emptiness a little less heavy. The internship couldn't get here soon enough. Then I'd stuff this void with so many fairy tale moments that every empty crevice would fill up. Cass, this is beautiful, she chuckled. But will anyone believe it's about my mom? Tonight is about magic, and, before I said happily ever afters, Mommy Dearest threw the doors open and barged in. Oh boy. I shielded Angie from her wrath. Senora Montez, we were just on our way down. Really, Castillo? Because my mother-in-law said you were running like a chicken with its head cut off looking for my daughter. And here I thought our classmate Gianna took the title for OC's biggest gossip monger. Et tu, abuelita? I knew Angelica made a mistake by hiring you. We should have hired a real planner, not a classmate playing dress-up, she hissed, conveniently forgetting her daughter was swaddled in layers of tulle with a tiara topping her tresses. I didn't point this out, though. No way I'd ruin this moment for Angie, or my future plans. Apurense! Everyone's waiting, Mommy Dearest said. Mama, stop! Angie walked around me. One small step for her, yet she cast me a glance as if knowing this tiny footstep was actually a huge leap. Cass has everything under control. Only someone young like us knows the importance of making a fashionably late entrance. Thank you, I mouthed. Maybe there was something deeper to these parties than the glitz and glamour, because while she was dressed like a Disney princess, she acted all warrior. Oh boy, yeah, definitely a different sort of mother here than what it sounds like her mom was like. The transition must have been palpable because Mommy Dearest blinked and blinked, grabbing her daughter's hands. Angie clasped them. They held on tighter than the zippers and hems holding them in all the right places. The soft light hit their profiles. When I tilted my head at just the right angle, they no longer resembled mother and daughter. They were people vowing to be best friends for the rest of their lives. A tear rolled down my cheek. I let myself out as quickly as I could. Like any future fairy godmother worth her weight, a good quince planner excelled at prepping the belle of the ball to take center stage, but they were even better at knowing when to disappear behind the curtains. Cute! Okay. Really excited to continue with this. I feel like it's funny, it's heartfelt, it's entertaining, and I love the Wedding Planner movie too, so I'm really enjoying this as a take on it. For sure a hit. All right, I'm gonna go get some water after all this reading, and then we will do our final chapter from It Waits in the Forest. All right, I have some sparkling water, which will hopefully help my voice with all the reading. So let's go ahead and do chapter 1 of It Waits in the Forest. I don't know how long the chapter in this one is. Not too bad, but it is definitely a lot of reading. Surprisingly, none of them have a prologue, although I am in favor of reading prologues. I feel like sometimes they have really important information. My mother always said that guilt had a scent, that it was as acrid as unripe ackee fruit and just as toxic. She claimed she could smell it on a person like the tang of unwashed skin, that it hung in the air like the scent of oncoming rain, suspended overhead like a threat. Then again, my mother lied about a lot of things. I learned at a very young age not to believe everything she said. What an opening paragraph. Ooh, okay. I love this. We've got a lying mother and the scent of guilt. Very descriptive language. I feel like that's a good hook to start the story. Look how the sky set up again, Edward said, facing the shop window. He had his back to me, the lines of his broad silhouette blurred against the sullen gray clouds. Outside, the colorful buildings cast gloomy shadows on the almost empty street. The bad weather seemed to have deterred the day's tourists from venturing beyond the pristine shops of the town center to our little souvenir store, which was tucked like an afterthought at the end of Main Street. Okay, so I'm guessing Edward is a coworker. They're working in a souvenir shop. I don't know if they're just coworkers or if it's a family shop. We probably need more information, but all right. It's Sahara dust, Edward said confidently. That's what have it looking like that. It can't be, his sister Allison said. If it was, I'd be coughing down the place. She sat with her feet propped on the counter, snacking on a brown bag of honey-roasted cashews. She had bought them from Cliff, the nuts man, whose cart rolled past the shop a few minutes earlier. Her eyes never left her iPad, an American dating show playing on the screen. Selena, tell my brother he's wrong. Okay, so we know they're not in the United States. They're in a tourist destination. Edward is apparently not her brother, but has a sister. I feel like this is kind of setting the scene. I'm wondering where the scent of guilt is going to tie in to what's happening. I feel like that for opening paragraph almost feels like a mini prologue before we get into what's actually happening. It's like an interesting way to do it. You're wrong, I said, dusting off the postcard display, only half listening to the siblings' disagreement. From time to time, particles of Sahara sand swept across the Atlantic Ocean, darkening the skies of the small Caribbean island of St. Virgil. It coated our land and our lungs and left a hazy, hazardous mess in the air. The sunsets were stunning, though, the skies streaked with brilliant reddish hues. Ha! Allison said. There, Selena knows. Selena works for you, Edward said dryly. She's not going to disagree with you while she's on the clock. He drew closer to me. Besides, I know what I'm talking about. They mentioned it on the radio last night. Said it might last a few days. We know we're in the Caribbean. We're on the island of St. Virgil. Also, this whole thing about sand from the Sahara, I guess that must really happen, but it's super creepy. And I feel like if we're getting like a thriller horror novel, maybe that's trying to set the stage for the Caribbean being a creepier, darker place than what you expect. Allison tucked her long twisted locks behind her ear. Who listens to the radio anymore? I did, last night. He rested his chin on my shoulder. His warm, minty breath brushed against my cheek. In the car. Selena can vouch for me. In my memory, the radio had been background noise. At the time, I'd been too distracted by the feel of his lips and his hands to listen to any reports, and honestly, I was a little offended to learn that he hadn't been. But still, he wasn't wrong. We'd been together last night, and for many of the nights before, a part of an unlabeled relationship that had bloomed between us over the past few months. Interesting. I feel like unlabeled relationships are sort of a red flag, and the fact that they're already together at the start of the book, and given the genre, I think things are not going to go well between the two of them. We'll see if I'm right, but it's an interesting way to start it. Edward wrapped his arms around my waist. I reached up to dust the highest row of postcards, scenes of Crimson Bay at sunset, an ibis bird perched in a frangipani tree, the mountains that stood like sentinels on the northern end of the island, all of them faded and yellowing with age. In the 7 months I'd been working in the shop, we'd sold maybe 3 in total. Ew, Allison said. If you two start kissing in front of me, I will vomit. We won't, I assured her. Edward drew me even closer. Well, let's not completely close off the possibility. Ew. Like, I feel like creepy with your sister there. I don't think we're supposed to like Edward. This is the vibe I'm getting so far. But it's interesting that she's working there, but they're not selling a lot of postcards. Maybe they're selling other stuff, but I don't know. Crimson Bay. Doesn't that also sound like a good location for a horror novel? I think it does. I pulled away to rearrange the carved figurines in the window. Some were dancing, others playing drums or steel pans. Overhead, wooden and bamboo chimes hung from nails in the rafters. Over the past few weeks, Edward had become bolder with his public displays of affection, as if he no longer cared what people thought about our association. I found the notion as tantalizing as it was worrying. Fair. That seems like an appropriate response for a teenager who's into him, but it's tantalizing and concerning at once. I would get that. Also interesting that we've got little like carved figurines playing music and dancing, and like the descriptions of the dust on the cards and the fading stuff. Like I feel like I have a vision of what this little shop feels like. It feels fairly vivid to me. Edward sighed dramatically. I continued to ignore him. He may have been pouting, but I knew he wasn't actually offended. Early in our relationship, I'd learned he enjoyed my seeming indifference. It was all part of my mystery, as he called it. Honestly, it was more like my weird, though he was too tactful to say that. Everyone on St. Virgil knew about my family, what my mother had done, and what had happened to my parents. Dun dun dun. Like, wait, what? What did your mother do? What happened to your parents? We want to know. Edward, like his sister, had a slightly morbid streak, perhaps a result of a very comfortable life. Not that I'd ever be foolish enough to call him out or criticize him for it. Not when it was that same streak that attracted him to me in the first place. And I'd be a hypocrite if I denied that it was his distinct lack of weird that made me like him back. I'd had enough weird in my life already. Besides, Edward was movie star gorgeous, with luminous brown eyes and rich dark brown skin. Apparently he'd liked me since we were in secondary school, him 2 years ahead. He said that's why he used to tease me so much. Even if he had made his crush obvious in the past, I wouldn't have noticed. Yes, he was smart and charming and the son of the revered chief of police, but none of that mattered. Back then, I'd only had eyes for one person, and it wasn't him. Interesting! I feel like we're getting a lot of information in a way that makes me want to know more. This, so far, I think is a really effective chapter in making me want to read on, making me want to keep turning the pages. It's also interesting that they're the children of the chief of police. Anyone think that's going to end up being important later on in the book for the genre that we're reading? I think it probably is. An argument broke out on Allison's dating show. The shop filled with voices raised in anger, occasionally undercut by the sound of a bleep sensor. Can't you watch something with a bit more substance? Edward asked, returning to the window. Oh, okay, big brother. He'd studied filmmaking. Of course he did. Yeah, for only a year, before dropping out to take a job at his mother's real estate firm. And yet, he considered himself the local authority on all forms of visual entertainment media. There's so much better content to spend your time on. Yeah. I really think we're not supposed to like him at all. Like, it's a little pretentious. He spent a year studying filmmaking. We know that he's 2 years older than her, and he dropped out after a year to take a job at his mom's real estate firm. So I'm guessing our heroine is like 17, 18. It is YA, so I'm guessing that's kind of what we're dealing with, and he's 19, 20. It says he has a job at his mom's real estate firm. I feel like having somebody who does real estate could also be a job that would make sense for the genre that we're reading. I'm curious if that's going to have an impact on the story. But also, if he works at the real estate firm, why is he at the shop? Just to be with his sort of girlfriend, maybe? How is this any different from those documentaries you're obsessed with? Allison pointed at her screen. This is about real life too, except, not boring. No, documentaries are about finding and presenting the truth. The trash you're watching. A thunderous hammering from next door cut him off. It rattled the walls and shook the glass windows. What the hell? Allison rocked forward, raising her voice to complain over the noise. Not again! It's after 6! The construction should be done for today! It's only 5 to 6, Edward interjected, but either Allison couldn't hear or she didn't want to listen. I'm sick and tired of it, she said. First it was the bakery across the street, now it's the jewelry store beside us. Here I am, just trying to watch this cinematic piece of art. No, Edward said, without feeling like I'm being repeatedly punched in the ears. The hammering stopped. Thank you, Allison said, when the silence persisted. Her chair creaked as she kicked back. I swear, if it's not one thing... Incoming, Edward announced, sounding a little too excited. It's another. Allison sucked her teeth. She paused her show. Tell me it's not Miss Heather again. No way she burned through all that incense already. We're almost out of stock. No, it's someone else. Edward leaned closer to the window. Older woman, white, a tourist probably. I don't recognize her. I like the brother-sister dynamic. I feel like this is accurately capturing what siblings are like with each other, so that's good. Well, don't stand there gawking at her. Allison tucked the iPad under the counter. That's not a one-way mirror, you dodo. Your face will scare her off. Edward approached the counter, reached across, and swiped the nuts from her. Better my gawking face than your ugly one. Hey! Allison tried to retrieve her snack from him. Edward held on to the brown bag, twisting the top to seal it. He threw me a smirk and started to back away. The door opened, triggering the chime that hung over the top. Oh, thank you, Edward said, clutching the bag to his chest like it was some great prize, rather than an oversweetened street snack. He did this sometimes, pretended to be a customer, brimming with awe and gratefulness. No one asked for this performance, but he seemed to enjoy it. I can't tell you what this means to me. I didn't know what else to... Oh! He backed right into the new customer, then made a show of recoiling in surprise, as if just noticing her for the first time. No doubt he'd formulated some story in his head. Perhaps he was pretending to be a farmer who needed a charm to cure blight, or a new homeowner who asked for a talisman for protection from evil Jumbie spirits. A future Best Actor winner he was not. Thankfully, Edward did not stick around, promptly exiting the scene after chewing it up. The newcomer paused in the center of the shop. It's very entertaining, but he's a mess. She looked the way most people did when they came to us. Nervous, suspicious, a little thrown by the innocuous decor. From the outside, our shop was no different from the 11 or so souvenir stores she'd have passed on her way here. But almost everyone who came to this shop came for a specific reason. Can we help you? Allison asked, not too kindly, when the silence stretched. I continued to clean the other side of the room, sneaking glances at them from the corner of my eye. The woman hesitated. I'm looking for someone. Someone who can help me. Are you sure you have the right place, ma'am? Allison's tone was dry, dismissive. They have an information booth on the port and a health center down the street. Maybe one of them can help you? The lady rocked back on her heels, indecisive. Allison's tone was a bit rude, and there was always a chance the customer would leave, but we had a system, a routine, a show that had started the second she stepped inside the shop. Okay, this is really interesting because they mentioned an incense earlier, and I'm like, wait, I thought it was just a regular shop, but what do they really do or sell? It's going to be something supernaturally, isn't it? I bet. That's, okay, intriguing. Step 1, establish an antagonist. I heard about you from Mikhail, the lady said, cautiously stepping forward. He told me to give you some password, some phrase, but I can't remember it. Maybe you know him. He works as a waiter on my ship. Ah, Mikhail. It had been a while since he had sent someone our way. Not as prolific as some of our other referrers, but he had a talent for sniffing out the right kind of person to send. I'm sorry, ma'am, Allison said, not sounding apologetic in the least. I think you have the wrong place. She left the counter, crossed the room, and pulled the door open. The lady flinched as she passed. Gloriosa superba, the lady blurted out, startling us and herself. That's it. That's what he said to tell you. Gloriosa superba. Allison's eyes narrowed. She said nothing, the door still open. Step 2. Establish an ally. You heard her, I said, without turning to face them. She said the magic words. She can stay. Allison waited a few beats, then appeared to reluctantly relent, shutting and locking the door. She turned the sign so that it read closed to anyone passing by. Is that necessary? The lady asked. You know where you are? Allison asked, but gave her no room to answer. If you did, you wouldn't ask them kind of questions. Oh, yes, of course. The lady's polite tone strained with false confidence. This is so interesting. It's so interesting. The way they're drawing her in, the way that it's mysterious what it is that they actually do, I'm so intrigued. I waited, listening, as Allison revealed the cost and took payment. There was a rattle and clip as Allison unlocked the safe behind the counter, then said, "Please empty your pockets and place all your things inside." "What?" the lady asked. "Why?" "They can be distractions." I won't be distracted." "It's not for you," Allison said. "Everything you own carries a psychic history of touch and use. Everyone who held it, every place it's been. Leaving it behind will allow for a clearer, more focused reading." The lady shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable leaving my things. I don't know you." "Well, those are our rules," Allison pressed. "If you don't want to—" "We can give her the key to the safe," I interjected. "If it will make her feel more comfortable, she can be the one who holds on to it." Step 3. Build trust. Are they conning her, or are they actually going to do something psychic? This is interesting. Allison's eyes widened. "But we only have the one key. We can't just give it to her. What if she loses it?" "I won't," the lady said quickly. "Yes, I would feel better about it." "Well then," I said with finality, my back still to them. Allison muttered something I did not hear, nor did I particularly want to. Even though it was all an act, her tone was not pleasant. The safe shut and locked with a snap and click. "This way," Allison said, and the sound of their footsteps crossed the floor. The door to the back room creaked open. I turned just in time to catch a glimpse of the lady's stunned expression as she took in the room before the door shut. Step 4. Research. From this point, I had to move quickly. I dropped the duster on the counter and retrieved the extra key for the safe from under the register. Because of course there was an extra key. Why wouldn't there be? It was a constant surprise to me that no one ever suspected. Then again, the people who came here tended to believe what they wanted. After unlocking the safe, I pulled out the contents. There was a saying, a woman's life was in her purse. In my experience, this was true. A wealth of information could be learned from a person's most mundane possessions. Yes, there were the obvious ID cards, address books, and phones, if you were lucky enough to get an unlocked one. But there were also the receipts and wrappers and ticket stubs, sometimes even novels and bottles of medication. You just had to know what to look for, and I always did. Ooh! This is great. So they are kind of conning her. So they're like pretending to be psychic. A few minutes later, I opened the door to the back room, instantly assaulted by the stench of heavy incense blending with the large cinnamon candle burning in the center of my reading table. I made a mental note to remind Allison to light one at a time. I knew the idea was to confound the guests with an influx of stimulation to the senses, but if we couldn't breathe, that could be an actual problem. The rest of the setup was flawless. The air slightly warm, but not hot. Nonsensical geometrical shapes have been chalked into the floor. Oddly assembled bundles of feathers, leaves, and dried sticks hung from the rafters above. Several glass bottles filled with dyed liquids glimmered on the shelves, sitting next to books with dead languages carved into their spine. Jars had been filled with dried petals, roots, seeds, painted stones, and plastic gems. And 24 white and red candles had been strategically set out for both ambiance and to flicker or extinguish when a series of hidden fans or the air conditioner's swing function was activated. But that wasn't all. No, then there were the real showstoppers. This is great. This sounds like such a good setup for this. The props that looked like they were plucked right out of a Hollywood movie, because they were. A few months earlier, a popular Indiana Jones ripoff franchise decided to film their newest movie on St. Virgil. They constructed a few set pieces on the northern coast. This included a hut for a local witch. While they never used the term voodoo, having recognized how problematic it was to misrepresent and demonize a whole religion, it had all the trappings of the old stereotype. While they were filming, a lot of props were stolen. It was a huge deal at the time, and even made international news. Chief Montgomery had vowed to catch the culprits, though he never did. I wondered what he would do if he ever found out his own children had been a part of it. The plot thickens. This is really interesting and entertaining. I'm fully engrossed in the story at this point. Curious to see where it goes, because I know it is going to get actually creepy. Nevertheless, our pilfering did provide the most interesting additions to our backroom decor, including all manner of fake animal parts preserved in glass jars, a black cauldron made of plaster and paint, and a charred skull that Allison had named Eddie just to piss off her brother, because of course. After Allison left the back room and shut the door, I took the seat across from Louisa. That was her name, according to her driver's license. At 61 years old, she'd recently sold her house and moved to Florida with her daughter and her daughter's family. She liked historical romance novels and badminton and went to the cinema every Tuesday. She had been an English teacher before retiring, and she lived with both chronic back pain and insomnia. Her husband had died just over a year ago. His name was Steve. It wasn't hard to work out why she'd come to us. 4 minutes into the session, a new record for me, Louisa's eyes welled with tears. "So, he is here?" she said. "I was worried he wouldn't show up. He's mad at me, I know." "You've been having nightmares about him," I guessed. It would explain the bottle of sleep medication she carried around with her. Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "Yes, except sometimes it doesn't feel like a dream. I wake up and he's standing there, at the edge of my bed, staring at me. He says nothing, but his expression, I know he's angry." "Does this have anything to do with selling your house?" I asked. "You're very good," she nodded frantically. "It took us 25 years to pay off our mortgage. He renovated it himself. I shouldn't have sold it, but it was too big, and I hated living there without him." "I see." "Every room had some reminder of him. I couldn't—" She dissolved into choked sobs. Muffling the sound behind her handkerchief, I waited for her to recover. My mother used to talk about guilt as if it were a real, living entity. Something she could sense, capture, manipulate, and dissipate at will. I saw it as something profoundly human. Regret for the things we did or didn't do, said or didn't say. For some, it became the ugly chair in their home, always present, but they learned to live with it. For others, it was a weight strapped to their back, dragging them down, dangerously overwhelming in their most vulnerable moments. The latter, I knew from experience. If someone threw me a lifeline, I'd want to grab it in an instant. But belief didn't come easy to me, not like it did for the people who came to this shop. I feel like we're now getting the setup for what her character arc is going to be, of belief in something, and maybe something about regret from the past. There definitely seems to be some strong themes here. This thing of guilt, because that's what the opening paragraph was about her mom's thoughts on guilt. Interesting. "Listen," I said, holding her gaze. "That isn't Steve you're seeing. That was just a dream. And I know that because he's in the room with us now." She blinked rapidly. "He is?" "Yes. And he wants me to tell you that he's not mad about the house. He's glad you're not living alone. He wants you to be surrounded by people who love you." Tears welled in her eyes again. Her lip curled into a sad smile, and for a moment I wondered if it was possible I'd said the right thing, that I'd actually helped someone without resorting to theatrics for once, that I wasn't just lying for profit. A con artist who sold fake spells and charms that were no better than placebos, only successful in situations where belief was already enough to fix it. "No," Louisa sniffed, wiping her cheeks. "I know what I've seen. It's him. I know it." She lifted her chin, a hint of steely stubbornness behind her gaze. "He's there. Every night. I haven't slept properly in months. How do I make him stop?" "Oh, right. Of course. How silly of me. For a second, I'd almost forgotten who I was, and why she was here. Like I told you, that's not Steve," I repeated. "Steve isn't angry at you. What you've been seeing is a spirit who's taken on your husband's face to try to trick you." She frowned. "What? Why?" "Good question." "Because some of them like to cause mischief. It's what they do." I lifted a hand to my head, a signal, a cue. "I sensed a dark presence the second you walked into the shop, but now it's clear to me. This is what has been haunting you." A cold wind swept through the room. The lit candles flickered. "Yes, there it is," I said. Okay. Louisa sat up and glanced about. She wrapped her arms around herself. "What do I do?" she whispered, as if afraid the spirit would overhear her. "I will give you a list of ingredients. When you return home, you are to boil them together under the light of a full moon. Strain out the water and let it sit in a bowl that has been blessed in the waters of a sacred stream until the next new moon. You will then take the water and wash the floor from your house." "Where do I get a bowl that's been blessed in the waters of a sacred stream?" "You know what?" I said, after pretending to think about it. "We may have one in stock." Louisa nodded, completely taken in. Her faith in me held for the rest of the session. It wasn't until we returned to the shop and she saw my face in better lighting, it faltered a little. This is very interesting. It's giving us a lot of atmosphere, which I think is great for kind of a horror thriller. She paused in the act of stuffing her purchases into her purse. Aren't you a bit young to be doing this? It was not an uncommon question. Most people expected an elderly woman with a face that betrayed decades of experience and wisdom. They did not anticipate a fresh-faced 18-year-old with unruly curly black hair and a slightly crooked nose that resulted from a tree climbing accident. Okay, so she is 18. I was about right. For some reason, this tended to throw off customers. That was why I tried to keep my distance from them before the session started. I know what I'm doing, I told Louisa. Age is irrelevant. I have been preparing for this since I was a baby. My mother taught me everything I know. My grandmother taught her before that. Of all the lies I told her that evening, this one skirted closest to the truth. And your mother is okay with you doing it on your own already? Louisa asked. My mother is dead, I said, which tended to prevent further questions. Understandably. 2 seconds after the chime of the door announced Louisa's exit, Allison pulled out all the cash and started counting. Good job today. I thought we'd never get rid of that ugly bowl. It's been sitting there for years. Thanks. I stood before the storefront window, watching Louisa disappear around the corner to the Amber Hotel. I'll admit it, Allison said. I freaked out when my parents cut me off, but there is a thrill to making your own money. A couple more weeks of this, and I'll have enough to get my own place away from them. I almost told her not to exaggerate, that her version of being cut off consisted of living in a massive house with a closet full of imported clothes and prepared meals and a live-in maid. What she meant was she didn't have pocket money anymore. Everyone should be so lucky to have parents who'd give us a shop to manage as punishment for dropping out of university after a month. Happy to help, I said instead, because despite everything, I did like Allison. Over the last year, she'd proven to be a good friend, taking me under her wing. During my worst days, when the nights felt endless, my memories had teeth, and silence was treacherous. She had been the one who pulled me out of my head. She dragged me to parties, given me this job, providing distraction so I could temporarily forget. Forget what? We want to know more about her history. This is like very effectively setting the scene for us, where we know a lot about who she is, what she does, the vibe of the place, the setting, the main characters, all in the first chapter. It's a really good first chapter. As I stood at the window, a pair of workmen from next door walked into view. Their navy blue overalls were sweat-stained and dusty. As they crossed the storefront, one caught my eye. I watched as he stopped, a flicker of recognition transforming into lip-curling disdain. Before I could move, blink, or breathe, he drew back and spat. The glob spattered against the glass in front of me. Ooh, why? Like, what is she connected to? Is it something her mom did? I want to know more. I flinched, then silently chastised myself for reacting. I'd given him exactly what he wanted, but no matter how much time passed, the depth of their hatred was still startling. Do you think it'll work? Allison asked, her voice breaking through the silence and causing me to flinch again. The man smirked. Apparently satisfied, he jogged off to catch up with his partner. What'll work? I asked. She clearly hadn't seen what just happened. It was for the best. There wasn't anything either of us could do about it. Just another day on St. Virgil. Do you think she'll stop seeing him at night? It took me a second to realize Allison was talking about Louisa. When I did, I threw her a judgmental side-eye. Even though I'd repeatedly told Allison that I made it up, sometimes I got the feeling she didn't quite believe me. Do I think the demon version of Steve will leave her alone? She rolled her eyes, tucking the money into a gray pencil case that she kept under the counter. You know what I mean. Will she stop imagining him or whatever? Maybe. Hopefully. Belief is a powerful thing. My mother used to say a ritual is only as powerful as the intentions behind it. Make sure they're good, she used to tell me, with all the gravity required of a warning. What you put in is exactly what you get out. And what about our intentions? Allison leaned against the counter, smirking. Do those factor in too? I seriously hoped not. For a few seconds more, I lingered at the window, the spit sliding down the glass. The sun had begun to set on St. Virgil, the sky painted in a brilliant, awful red. It looked like Edward had been right after all. If I were a different person, I'd have seen the bloody sky and read it as a sign of something sinister on the horizon. Instead, I turned away from the window and returned to dusting. Whew! What a chapter! That was really, really good. Okay, so I'm gonna say, in terms of which I'm most interested in, I'm pretty split between It Waits in the Forest and the Quince Project. So I think what I'm gonna do is let my patrons vote on which one they want to see me read first. I'm gonna read both of them eventually, but I'll let them vote on which one I'm gonna read for the purposes of this video. I think both of these have fantastic first chapters. They're just very different tonally, which makes sense because their genres are vastly different. The Wings Upon Her Back doesn't have a great first chapter. I'm gonna keep going for a bit and see if it kind of picks up and catches my interest a little bit more. There are pieces of it that seem interesting, but it didn't grab my interest as much right off the bat. So I'm gonna go make a poll for my patrons, but comment down below and let me know which of the three you would have chosen to read on with. It has been a few days. I put it to a vote, and the book that my patrons most wanted to see me continue with was It Waits in the Forest by Sarah Dass. And I have, in fact, completed this book, and I can tell you I loved it. I think it's really good. I just finished it, so I haven't written a review yet or fully processed all of my thoughts, but I'm feeling like this is a 5-star read for me. I was definitely a fan. It's a supernatural mystery is what I would call it. It ends up having a lot of mystery elements to it, and it's got a lot of twists, it's got a lot of drama, it's got relationship drama, it's got red herrings and things you don't expect and horror elements. She starts having these really disturbing visions. I won't say too much more than that, but this was very good. So if the first chapter intrigued you, I'm here to say that the rest of the book is equally great, and I would recommend picking it up. So I think this was a success. I am gonna read the Quince Project soon as well. It's just not gonna be part of this video, but hopefully this was fun. Let me know what you think of this format in the comments down below. Would you want to see me do this again? It was definitely interesting to see how a first chapter sucks me in or doesn't. And I will say, because I've gone back now and edited the footage of me reading the books, and honestly re-listening to myself read the first chapter of The Wings Upon Her Back, I feel like it's also a little overwritten. I don't know. I'm gonna read a few more chapters and see if it sucks me in, because maybe it's just a bad first chapter and it'll get more interesting. But it's not a great start. I do think that It Waits in the Forest and the Quince Project both had excellent first chapters, and It Waits in the Forest definitely lived up to expectations given the first chapter. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know your thoughts on the video format. Let me know which of these 3 books you would have picked to continue with. Was it Waits in the Forest as well, or would you have gone with something else? Let me know in the comments down below, and let me know if you'd like to see me do this again, because I think this was really fun. If you like this video, it always helps if you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.